The final month in the summer movie season has passed, and I actually saw quite a bit of movies in August. However, most of those movies were actually older releases, and only 5 of them were new releases in August. But with that being said, I'd like to give you the rankings of the 5 new movie releases that I did see, ranked from worst to best. Also, please don't forget to join me in the comments section below. Let me know what some of the movies that you saw in August were, what movies did you like, and maybe what some of the movies that you didn't like and didn't live up to your expectations. Coming in at number 5, The Naked Gun. This was probably my most unique movie theater experience this year, and an experience that I don't really get too often. So the original Naked Gun movie is one of my favorite comedy movies that I saw as a kid. This is one that my dad showed me quite a bit. I can remember watching it fondly with him multiple times, on a monthly basis with him. So I kind of went into this movie with decently high expectations. I even took my dad with me to see this on opening night. It was a Friday night in a packed theater in Alamo Drafthouse. It was the biggest theater that they had. And why this was such a unique theater experience for me this year, and one that I generally don't get very often for me, is because this was a movie that the packed crowd was mostly enjoying this one. Like, there was some legitimately laugh out loud moments that the crowd was going crazy for, and this was multiple times throughout the movie. I'd say probably about every 5 to 7 minutes or so, something was happening in the movie that was causing a pretty loud laughter within the audience. However, that generally wasn't me or my dad, and that really surprised me a bunch until he kind of told me after the movie something that clicked in my head with this movie, in that, he thinks he would have enjoyed this movie way more if he didn't see the older movies, because he already, if you've already seen these movies and you've seen them a number of times, you're already used to the comedy style that they are, the deadpan delivery, where, the actor is giving everything with a serious face because he has to let the audience know that he doesn't think this is a comedy, which then makes everything so much funny because the actor thinks that this is normal stuff, but it's clearly obviously a comedy. So all of the jokes, just for us, we kind of felt like we saw them coming, so a lot of the deliveries just didn't hit as much. They were still, funny, like kind of like a smirk, little small chuckle here and there, but I was just surprised how much I didn't really find this one that funny. But I don't want to say that it was a bad movie, because again, I thought it was really well made for what this was as a sequel to this, famous legacy comedy set of movies from, decades past. And I thought they did as good of a job as you could do with these kind of movies, as clearly evidenced by, the crowd that we were with having a really good time with this movie. But it just didn't necessarily work for us that well. And to give it a little bit more positive too, I thought Liam Neeson and Pamela Anderson were perfectly casted in this movie. I thought they both did a really good job. But like I said, I thought I was just going to like this one more, and I didn't end up liking it as much as I did. And that's okay. Oh well, it happens sometimes in movies. Coming in at number 4, Caught Stealing. I mostly enjoyed this movie. This reminded me of an action movie that you would rent in the 2000s. This starred Austin Butler in this New York kind of crime, dark comedy movie where he's this alcoholic bartender working in New York City. He had this car crash accident when he was younger. He was a high school phenom baseball player. And the rest of the movie actually gets surprisingly dark. There's some dark comedy moments in here. I wasn't expecting the level of violence going into this movie, although I did know going in that this was kind of a mobster type of movie. You've got these Russian mobsters who are kind of tracking down Austin Butler and Matt Smith. And then you have Liv Schreiber and Vincent D'Onofrio as these Hebrew kind of muscle men also involved in this. And it's one kind of just big triangle mess back and forth of trying to find Austin Butler, trying to find the money, trying to find it together. There's a couple little twists in there that are pretty nice. And it mostly wraps itself up in a pretty entertaining 2-hour watch. I felt bad for this movie because I did see it on opening Friday. However, I didn't necessarily see it in peak time. I saw it around 4:30, and there was only about 8 to 10 people in the theater, and I saw this one in the biggest theater possible. So I'm just not sure if the marketing wasn't there for this movie, or we're just late in the summer season and people are getting ready back for school. But like I said, not a lot of people were in my theater seeing it. Maybe they'll discover it later. But one thing for sure with this movie that I think cemented itself is Austin Butler is a legitimate rising Hollywood star. I think if he's not an A-list actor yet, he has very much become becoming one. I don't think there's an Austin Butler performance I haven't enjoyed, and I thought he did a really good job in this one. I also think another unsung hero of this movie and who's turning into a really good actress in everything I see her in is Zoe Kravitz. She plays kind of his girlfriend in this movie that's trying to follow him along throughout this movie and figure out also what's kind of going on with his head state and why he keeps kind of showing up injured. In the end, it reminded me a lot of a Guy Ritchie movie, and those are movies that I really enjoy a lot. So if you're into those kind of Guy Ritchie style action flicks set in a New York setting with Austin Butler, I think you're going to have a pretty good time with this one. Coming in at number 3, K-pop Demon Hunters. Probably my biggest surprise of the summer. I am clearly not the target audience for this movie. I'm a 33-year-old male dad. I didn't get on the craze early with this movie when it first came out, but this was one of the biggest kind of cultural movie moments, even though it was a Netflix movie and it was later released in theater for a weekend, but it was one of the biggest cultural movie kind of moments that we had this summer. I think it's actually Netflix's most watched movie of all time. It's this kind of part big play concert animation movie with also a pretty good story behind it. We put this on for our kids on a Saturday morning and then had to watch it in 2 parts. But again, I was really surprised with how much I liked this. I thought the songs were actually super catchy. When I was watching with my wife and kids, I actually think out of all of us, I was the one most in tune with the movie, the one paying attention the most, the one who wanted to keep watching it the most. My kids ended up did liking it. My daughter, actually, funny enough, had her first soccer practice yesterday, and their soccer team, all the girls voted to name their soccer team the K-pop Demon Hunters Chocolate. Why you had chocolate at the end, who knows? But this is obviously, and this soccer team is filled with 4 to 6-year-old girls. Again, this goes back to the point of how, big culturally this movie has kind of got this summer. I do want to give Netflix a little bit of a shout out here for going against the grain in their own kind of business structure in releasing this movie in theater, even though if it was just a weekend. The Alamo Drafthouse that I go to is absolutely pretty much sold out for every showing that the weekend was at, and it played it in the biggest theater possible. I had a niece and one of my sister go to these movies, and they said it was an absolutely great time. The kind of bummer in this is that it wasn't this big theatrical release initially, because there could have been some good marketing around it, and it could have honestly become the biggest movie of the summer and one of the biggest memorable moments of the theatrical year for 2025. And again, it's not only a really good kind of like semi-concert movie with really catchy songs, I actually was really invested into the storyline. The storyline is essentially you've got these 3 warriors who are also singers, and it's this long history of warrior singers who are keeping these demons at bay through their songs. They put up this protective shield over the world when they sing, and the demons are essentially trying to escape, and the new demon's plans is to essentially turn into a boy band this time and challenge them via singing. And it goes on back and forth between these 2 groups, and there's some twists along the way in this movie that make it a little bit more rich and in-depth. But again, probably the biggest movie surprise of the year for me, as I wasn't the target audience. I think it's really smart that they're already planning the sequel, and hopefully the sequel gets a little bit more of an extended theatrical release when it does come out, because it could really be a big boon to movie theaters if it does go. Coming in at number 2, highest to lowest. So I went into this movie with very little expectations and not knowing much about it outside of knowing that Spike Lee was the director and Denzel Washington was starring in it. And I don't even necessarily have that much of an extensive background with Spike Lee films, but I am a big Denzel Washington fan, and I'm always going to show up to any movie that he is in, especially if it's in theater. This is also an Apple Plus movie, so it's eventually going to go stream on Apple if you don't get a chance to go and see it in theater. And if you don't get to see it in theater, definitely go give it a shot on Apple TV Plus. So this movie was a really interesting movie too, because it's one that I didn't know if I liked in the first half of the movie, but as it kept going and as I sat with it more by the end of it, as I was driving home and slept on it, I actually really enjoyed this movie. Denzel Washington is kind of this, music mogul, star maker, where he's got the best ears in the business, and he's been finding, Grammy winner again and again and again. But he's getting later in life, and it's kind of portraying him as he's losing his touch a little bit, not necessarily because of the talent, but all the other things around it. He's got, he owns this record label. There's partners involved with a record label. Some are trying to sell, he's trying to stay. And then through all of this, his son and his best friend get kidnapped after basketball practice. So the movie turns into this ransom movie where Denzel is trying to get back his son, and his son actually ends up being released because the kidnappers do a little bit of a mix-up and actually take his friend and not him. So then there's some kind of moral conflict in his head because the ransomers are demanding so much money, and he's trying to also buy back his business at the same time. So there's a clear kind of, consciousness issue in his head of what he should be doing, paying the ransom of, it was like 17.5 million or something. Essentially all the money that he needed to buy the stake back in his business to keep his record label intact. But throughout this movie, which is part of the reason why I wasn't sure if I enjoyed it, especially in the first half, was Spike Lee, and apparently someone told me, I guess he does this a lot in his films, so I can't 100% confirm that or not, but strangely to me, there was always this type of piano score playing in the background in almost every scene. And as this ransom movie is kind of progressing through the movie, there's these scenes that should be pretty intense with Denzel, his son, Denzel, his wife, or with the police officers involved in this and trying to get Denzel's son back. That should feel a little bit more heavy. You'd want a little bit more, that emotional feel in it. But this piano score is playing in the background that kind of undercuts it a little bit. So again, in that first half of the movie, when I was hearing this, I wasn't sure if I was really, digging that choice. I didn't think that was the smartest choice because it was undercutting what some of those emotional scenes could have been. But after thinking about it again, I do think I like the direction and maybe understand it. I don't know if this is where Spike Lee was intending to go with it, but I kind of took it as he was putting us in the head of Denzel Washington, who has the best ears in the business. So we're constantly hearing music. So this may have been what Denzel's character has kind of been like his whole life, where he's constantly hearing music, these pitches throughout, every moment of his life. So I thought that was maybe Spike giving the audience a little bit of an immersive experience here with that. But I would have toned it down just a little bit to just add some weight to more of those scenes. But then the film eventually, concludes very strongly, in my opinion, where Denzel then with his partner goes off and finds the ransomers himself, ditching kind of the police in the background. And then it kind of has this beautiful Denzel finding himself moment again, finding what he really likes. And it ends with this absolutely beautiful musical piece by this artist. She's a phenomenal singer. She's got to be a famous, I don't know if she's a famous singer in real life, but she's got to be a singer because her voice was absolutely beautiful. And then a pianist again playing as she is singing. And this was Denzel, he kind of leaves his old record, the big record label behind. He's starting a new thing with just his family, and this ends up being his first record label signing with this musician. She's super talented, but again, very beautiful way to end the movie. Highly recommend this movie if you guys are looking for an original film to watch at the end of this summer or going into the school season when it eventually comes out onto Apple TV+. And I'm not saying anything that's going to surprise anybody, but Denzel gives a classic Denzel performance that is absolutely phenomenal. And at number 1, Weapons. So the big question that always comes with Weapons is, was it the scariest movie of the year? Because it was marketed very similarly to Longlegs last year, and that they both had very eerie, creepy, very unique marketing that made you very interested to want to see this movie in theater. You had a couple early teasers of, some black and white home cameras looking outside, seeing kids run in that Naruto style. And those were kind of some of the first images and videos we got of this movie. So that was already kind of very enticing going in. Then there was the rumors of Jordan Peele wanting to buy the script to this movie and ended up firing his management team as a result of losing the bid to get this movie. I'm not 100% sure if that is actually fully true, but it kind of added to the mystique of this movie, this, pumping up how potentially scary this movie was going to be. So after seeing it in theaters, was it the scariest movie I've ever seen? And was it the scariest movie of 2025? No, I didn't think so. But I also don't think that necessarily detracted from how good this movie was. This was a really, really good movie. And this was a awesome movie theater experience. Saw this again on opening night. We went with my best friend and his fiance, and the style in which this movie is told, it's told over 6 different characters, and it constantly goes back and forth between the characters. So it gives you one perspective over one time period, then it goes to another character's perspective in one time period. And there is a sense of serious darkness, some sadisticness, some unknown in this movie as you're seeing these stories that does leave you pretty, tensed up in your seat wanting to see what happens in this movie. And you could also feel it in the crowd around you, especially in the first half of this movie. But one thing that was kind of surprising that I don't think many people saw or expected going into this movie was how kind of funny it ended up being. It's not a horror comedy by any stretch of the means. It's not like that. But there's some legitimate funny moments that is written into this movie that will have you laughing. It'll have some of the people that you're with laughing. And it's a really good combination with the dark, sadistic nature of the other side of this movie, which is also really good as well. You also got a lot of really good actors and actresses in this movie, from Julia Gardner and Josh Brolin kind of as the main characters. And this has kind of become one of the breakout years for Julia Gardner. She had Wolfman earlier this year, Fantastic Four, a month before Weapons, and then starring in this movie Weapons. So plot-wise, it's about a classroom in an elementary school where all of the kids but one go missing at 2:17 a.m. Goes back again to the teasers where you have all of these. It shows these home cameras looking outside, and you see all these kids who just get up and run. And the movie is then essentially trying to figure out where these kids go and the reasons that they're leaving their homes at 2:17 a.m. And then it gets broken out into the different perspectives of the 6 main characters in this. This movie does have a solid amount of gore, especially in the third act, which has one of the at the same time, again, one of the craziest, goriest, bonkers, funny endings that I have seen in quite some time. It's probably not going to work for some. However, it really worked for me. I thought it was laugh out loud hilarious while also being pretty grotesque at the same time. So this is one I'm really looking forward to watching again when it eventually comes on to whatever streaming service it does. And this movie was written and directed by Zach Krieger, and this is his follow-up to his other written and directed movie Barbarian back a couple years ago, which I was a big fan of as well. I think I liked Barbarian a little bit more than this one. That's not knocking this one. I thought Barbarian was really good. But that's all in all to say that Krieger is now 2 for 2 with me, and I'm really excited to see his future work going forward. I believe his next movie is actually going to be a Resident Evil movie, which, again, after seeing these 2 movies, Barbarian and Weapons, this being my favorite movie of August, I'm really excited to see what he does with the Resident Evil franchise. So for me, August was a really good movie month with the old movies I saw, and then as well as these 5 new movie releases. So if you haven't seen these new releases, hopefully these reviews give you some encouragement to go check these out in theater or maybe at home when they come to streaming.